Hello, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today I'm going to be returning to Vietnam 65, a new turn-based game published by Matrix and Slytherin, and it focuses on the Vietnam War in the Ia Drang Valley in 1965. If you've seen the previous videos, you'll know it's not specific to any one location in the game. It's not a game that, while it represents the Ia Drang Valley, or at least that's the kind of the terrain area that's represented in the game. It's not a, you know, accurate. It's not a reproduction of the Ia Drang Valley. These aren't specific towns, cities, specific units, although I'm not sure if it's been put into place yet. I believe it has. One of the new updates will or does allow you to start naming your units to try and give a little bit more personality to the game and to your units, make you care a little bit more about your units than maybe you would have previously. I am also playing this game. This recording is over, I don't know if it's a month, but it's several weeks old. So it is before the most recent update, and it also is before I knew some of the things I know about the game now. For example, this was recorded right after I first started playing the game, before I realized you could repair units or repair or reinforce wounded units. So you're going to see a lot of wounded units marching around the map because, frankly, I just didn't know any better. But it is what it is. As you can see here, we're about 2/3 of the way through the game. You get 45 turns. And we've got a slight edge in terms of the hearts and mind, which is how the game is rated. So on the top left there, you can see the score is 51 hearts and mind, which means we have 51% of the hearts and mind of the North or South Vietnamese people in this region. As our helicopter just got shot down, we lost one. But basically, that's where we're at right now in the game. You can see here there are enemy RPG guys just destroyed that helicopter of ours, and we move that unit into the village, you can see their sentiments lie with the North Vietnamese. That's why that flag came up. They're not a pro-U.S. village. So as you move into different cities and towns in this game, you get different updates. So if you move a unit into a town, you can possibly get intel, which would locate where an enemy unit is. You can also get a sense of where their loyalties lie. If there's an American flag there, their hearts and minds score, I believe, is over 50% for that village. If there's a North Vietnamese flag there, their hearts and minds value is above 51% for the NVA or VC, the Liberation Army or what have you. And sometimes you'll get updates that'll show you where exactly enemy units are. You can raise ARVN units, which are South Vietnamese Army units, by creating a forward operating base with Green Berets in it. That gives you the ability to raise South Vietnamese troops. Not a terribly accurate assessment of how those troops are raised, but an interesting game mechanic anyway, that gives the Green Berets a little bit more utility otherwise. Green Berets are kind of these fast, long-range scouting units that aren't ideal for frontline assault, kind of in an attempt to represent their special forces nature of the game. And that's kind of an interesting element. They get a little bit more line of sight. I believe 3 hexes for line of sight instead of 2, which is the norm for most infantry. They can also move further than most infantry, I believe. And they also have the ability, as I said, to train South Vietnamese Army units. And the benefit of the South Vietnamese Army units is when they move into villages, they have a much greater chance of success in terms of getting intelligence out of the local villages. And as they die and whatnot, you don't lose as much of the hearts and mind, or more specifically, of your political capital, which is also an important aspect, is the political points that you have, which represents the United States' willingness to wage war against the Vietnamese in Vietnam. You can see here we just took out an enemy RPG unit. And we've got a fire base kind of in the middle of the map, a little bit off center, not quite in the middle. And then we've got a forward operating base here as well. I've also raised some helicopter units, some UH-1 Cobras, which are providing valuable indirect fire support against the Vietnamese troops. They've been very successful here so far in this game. I've Got an engineer unit there that's kind of rolling south, and all of my units seemingly are wounded. So we're losing lots of casualties, but we're seeing quite a bit of success. You can see that Hearts and Minds tally is ticking its way up to 52. So again, anything above 50 represents essentially winning. Anything below 50 represents you losing the hearts and minds of the people. When you destroy enemy units, your political points go up, which represents the will of the American government to deploy more troops. And as you lose troops, or simply as you move around, you end up losing political points, representing kind of the operational cost of operating in Vietnam. Again, with certain exceptions made for the South Vietnamese troops not having as much of an impact on that. But you can see here I'm moving these helicopters around the map kind of as mobile artillery. They don't have as long of a range as artillery, and they're not quite as devastating as air attacks, but they are very useful in that I can as soon as I detect an enemy unit, I can rapidly move that helicopter toward it and bring it under fire. One thing you do want to keep in mind, in my opinion, it's best to keep the air units 1 hex away from the enemy. If you deploy them right on top and attack directly, you don't have nearly the same success as if you fire from 1 hex away where the enemy can't shoot back, and all you can do is successfully destroy them or fail to destroy them, but there's no chance of damage, with the exception of if you run into an enemy RPG unit, which can ambush your helicopter unit as it's flying through the sky. RPG units are an interesting element to this game. I do find them a tad annoying in the sense that that's not the way the conflict worked. You really didn't... Oh boy, Vietnamese base just knocked out that APC or engineer unit of ours. So we now know there's an enemy base there, and we're going to go ahead and use our chopper to destroy it. So there you go. We just destroyed an NVA base, which represents the North Vietnamese Army units in that area, and that base in that area. So that's a pretty big thing. You can see our Hearts and Minds score is ticking up further. We're up to 54. But as I was saying, I don't think that's an accurate representation of how RPGs worked. You're never going to shoot down a helicopter moving full bore across the map. It's more of a gameplay mechanic than it is actually rooted in any kind of reality. That's not to say RPGs didn't have a big influence on the war. They certainly did, and they did pose a threat to helicopters. But when a helicopter's flying, 100 miles an hour treetop over the jungle, typically the choppers would be on you before you had any chance to react. And even if you did react, you were not likely to hit with an unguided rocket a unit moving at 100 miles an hour just on eyesight alone. So a little bit frustrating there, but again, not in any way taking away from what the game is or what it does. Just kind of, I guess, a personal annoyance. Again, the game is not focusing on recreating the squad level tactics of the war. So in that sense, I guess it doesn't matter. You can see here we're moving through different villages, kind of exiting out, coming back in. One thing I didn't know at the time is the campfires represent something to the effect of, pro enemy. I don't know if they call them VC or NVA or what have you, because they have both in the game. But the campfires in villages indicate you should probably go check it out. It means there may be intel, there may be enemy units around, but essentially it means that the VC or something have visited there recently and indicates an area that you probably want to send troops in to kind of solidify your hearts and mind factor against the enemy there. You can see these choppers here in this particular game are going to play a devastating role against the VC and NVA forces. And there we go. We just took that village. It still has the campfire up, but at the very least it's got our troops in there. No new intel, however, telling us where there are any enemy bad guys. Supply is a big aspect of this game, as you've seen probably if you looked at my previous videos. It's something that sometimes feels a little bit annoying. The game is very heavily logistics-based, but it's an interesting aspect. It kind of lends credence to the importance of helicopters in the Vietnam War, because essentially, there are no front lines. You've got troops deployed all over the map, all over Vietnam, and the only essentially thing tying them all together and keeping them effective in combat and giving the U.S. any kind of chance in this conflict is the fact that you've got helicopters which can fly anywhere, bringing supplies to almost anyone in order to kind of keep them combat effective here. You can see the enemy has 4 units still on the map, I believe, and well, I got more than that. Maybe I read that wrong. Now, I am playing on regular difficulty, which is the developer even has said is probably not the difficulty level you want to play on the game if you're somewhat comfortable or if you've played war games before. So it might be playing essentially on easy mode, but this was, again, one of the first times that I had played this. I do plan to revisit the series more to talk more about kind of the history of the Vietnam War. That is something that I'd like to kind of discuss. It's an interesting topic. I don't think there's enough discussion or whatnot out there. There's plenty of literature, but I guess within the gaming community anyway, Vietnam gets ignored a lot because it's not a glorious war. It's not this war where we can say, yeah, the U.S. got involved or whoever got involved. They were on the right side of history. They were doing what was good, and they were successful. In many ways, Vietnam was the opposite of all of that. The U.S. wasn't successful in Vietnam. Many would argue that the U.S.'s involvement was not on the right side of history or ethics or what have you. Certainly, many veterans have differing opinions on that, but whether you were for or against the war itself, it certainly is a much more clouded and controversial conflict. Probably one of the most controversial conflicts in recent U.S., not recent, definitely in recent, but one of the most controversial U.S. conflicts in history, and just kind of everything that World War II represents to people who love to play games, and kind of this sense of, this was the right war, as people often like to kind of label World War II. Everything that was quote-unquote good about World War II, that makes it easy to model, play, and not feel bad about it, is the exact opposite when you look at Vietnam, a conflict that has, at the very least, you have a difficult time kind of pulling out the importance and the meaning in terms of a positive sense. So I think I'd like to do a video series about that, maybe the history of some of the operations, the conflicts, and just kind of the conflict as a whole. My father actually fought there in Vietnam. It was one of the areas he served, and I think it'd be an interesting series to do on Vietnam. But we'll probably use some Vietnam gameplay for that, now that I've been rambling on this for, 3 minutes now while we're playing this game. That's probably something that I'll use some footage from Vietnam 65, maybe a few other Vietnam games if I can find any. I remember one of the games I used to play a lot growing up was a first-person shooter called Nam, which was really just kind of Rambo in Vietnam. I guess Rambo was in Vietnam, but kind of just like one of those ridiculous first-person shooters where it was very, in some sense, Doom-like, but much more modern in Vietnam. And I don't know if I still can get that up and running. There's not a whole lot of Vietnam games to use, so like I said, I'm sure I'll use some footage from this, but I'm not quite sure what else I will do. You can see here we've definitely got our Hearts and Minds score up to 57. Our air units are playing a decisive role in this game. I'm trying to keep those units off the road, but the problem is unless you're on the road, it's really hard to move. Okay, so there you have it. Quite a few enemy units here around. I guess we'll lay these guys down in an ambush. But one of the things that's really helping here is we keep destroying so many units. You see the enemy only has 1 unit on the map, at least as of the start of that last turn. That was that 1 unit there that you can see to the west of that village. And essentially, because we're destroying these enemy units so quickly from them coming onto the map, we're dominating the map, dominating the villages, and as a result, our Hearts and Minds score continues to go up. I think if I do another series that does focus with this game, I'll probably do it on Veteran. The game is much, much more difficult on Veteran. So I think that's something that would be interesting to attempt. One thing I think is important with this game, I've seen some criticism. I wouldn't, maybe it's not criticism, but I listen to Three Moves Ahead, which is kind of a strategy game podcast, and also occasionally check in at Quarter to Three, which is a blog that's run by, or a website that's run by Tom Chick, who was originally on Three Moves Ahead and does a lot of his own stuff, focuses a lot on film as well. And a lot of people have been talking, at least Tom Chick, Bruce Garrick, and some of the other people on Three Moves Ahead, or not Three Moves Ahead, yeah, Three Moves Ahead, have been talking about how this game is a game you need to know a lot to play. And I don't really agree with that. I do agree that you need to have some strategy game concepts that you're familiar with. But to be honest, as someone who's not I hesitate to say I'm not a hardcore war gamer. I don't know what that really is. But I'm not someone who really sits down and looks forward to playing Gary Grigsby's games. Not that I don't enjoy them, because I do, but they're just not, I'm not going to, on an ordinary day, I'm not going to sit down and jump headlong into spreadsheeting it with a Gary Grigsby game. As much as I enjoy playing the games occasionally, they're not the typical game experience that I would play. Not on an everyday basis. When I sit down, the game I play the most is not that type of game. I'll play a lot more games that are a little bit more basic. There's nothing wrong with that. I play quite a bit of Commander the Great War, which is certainly on the more basic side of things. I play more of that than I do To End All Wars, for example, as I run those guys into a minefield. And as someone who's more onto the casual side of wargaming, I think this game is incredibly easy to pick up. Granted, that's where I'm coming from. I'm not a novice who's never played a war game before, but I think the most difficult thing for people to do with this game is understand the logistics and kind of just that thought process of expanding out throughout the map rapidly, because if you stay in one corner, you're dead. You've got to quickly move across the map and, seek out the enemy, destroy them, and take the control of these villages. But I think outside of a few basic things that you need to understand about strategy games, and in some ways things about this game that are different, it's an incredibly easy game to get into. Maybe that's just me saying that because I'm so used to obscure user interfaces that are difficult to learn and difficult to use. There are a lot of games out there that do not have friendly user interfaces, and this game obviously has a very friendly one, and that's in part because the developer even said the game was originally designed for iPad and then ported to the PC. So that's another thing that's different about the game, is very rarely do you see games designed specifically for the iPad and ported to the PC, although I think we're starting to see those maybe a little bit more common now, especially with the success of sales on the iPad. But I don't feel like this is a game where it takes a long time to get to understand how the game works. I think this is a game you can pick up, you can play, you can figure things out pretty darn quick. Again, to be successful at veteran level, yeah, you probably need to be pretty comfortable with strategy games and what have you, but I wouldn't say that this is a game that requires you to be a grognard in any sense of the imagination. So in that sense, I kind of disagree with the opinion of Garrick and Chick that you need to be very familiar with these types of games in order to be successful. The user interface is so simple that that's just not the case. Again, maybe to excel at veteran level, that may be the case, but not from just picking it up in playing standpoint. Anyone can pick up a game and play and lose. That's true, but I think when you lose in this game, it's pretty clear why you're losing. The game doesn't hesitate to bash you over the head and wipe your units out. So you can certainly pick the game up, play it, and see, well, this isn't going well. Maybe I should change how I'm approaching things. Again, I'm not saying you're going to be excellent at the game right off the bat, but the user interface is just so easy to use and so easy to play that as someone who didn't read the manual, they highly recommend you read the manual. I didn't. I haven't even touched the manual yet. I just kind of started playing, recording, and talking about my thoughts, and I got a pretty good sense of how the game works. There are some things that I found out by listening to their podcast that I didn't know that I would have known if I had read the manual, and sure, they would have made me a little bit more successful in my approach. For example, I didn't know essentially that when when you engage a VC unit, if that VC unit is not destroyed and they retreat, they more or less retreat off map. It seems like they just kind of disappear. If you have a good line of sight on them and you can kind of see them, you do see they follow a certain retreating route, which I'd be interested to see. I've never been successful in getting units that would kind of intercept that retreat to see if they could be engaged or ambushed at that point. But essentially, if you don't defeat them and they retreat, they more or less retreat off map. There's no unit, or there's no limit as far as where they can run, and that's to kind of simulate the ability of the VC to just kind of disappear when engaged and just kind of vanish into the jungle. So that's certainly something that's different that I didn't know until I had listened to that podcast. But I wouldn't say, and the kind of the way that spawning handles random spawn points, some of the intricacies, the campfire, for example, that's obviously a big element of the game, knowing, you should probably go check out villages with the campfires in there because that indicates VC units being around or VC sympathies in that village. I didn't know any of that until I had listened to the podcast. At the same time, I think it's something I would have figured out pretty quick, and it wasn't something that was preventing me from playing the game. I had already won this. Oh, wow, I think I just spoiled it. I guess it's pretty obvious at this point, given that we've got a 58 Hearts and Minds score and we're starting to run into the end of these turns. But I had already won this particular game. Granted, it's on recruit or normal or whatever, so it's not difficult at all. The developer even says any experienced wargamers or any experienced gamers should probably play on veteran. This is kind of like playing kiddie mode, but that's not the point, because when you're playing a game, even if it's not meant to be played per se on the regular difficulty like I'm playing right now, someone who picks the game up and just starts to play it, who doesn't know it, who isn't familiar with the game, probably isn't going to pick the game up and play on veteran, unless they're a masochist. But as far as the game's concerned, yeah, you pick it up, you play on regular, and there are certain things that are going to overwhelm you. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but it's not so it's not so awe-inspiring or intimidating that you pick up the game, you play, and you just say, you know what, I can't do this, I'm going to put this game down. There are games like that. I've already mentioned them, but like Gary Grigsby's games, those are the types of games that if you just hand that to any ordinary person who picks up that game and starts to play it, they're going to get overwhelmed, most likely. There's a very certain type of person who loves Grigsby games. I enjoy them quite a bit myself. They're just not kind of my average cup of tea, the game I'll play any day of the week. But if you hand that game to just an ordinary person, not familiar with war games, not familiar with strategy games, they're going to take one look at that game. They're going to be so overwhelmed, they're not going to know where to go. And unless it's something they're absolutely fascinated about or just are inspired to research and figure out, that's probably going to be it for them. And I don't get that at all from this game. And I think that's one thing, I'm kind of rambling at this point, but that's one thing I took away from some of the reviews and whatnot, especially by Grigsby and Chick of the game, that I took to be just a little bit inaccurate. I love Three Moves Ahead. It's my favorite podcast out there, and I think they do some great stuff. But at least in that sense, I think they were a little bit off base, because it's just, I don't see that. I don't understand how you can come to that impression unless you just turn the game on and immediately start playing from veteran. And in that case, yeah, I can see you should definitely read the manual before you crank on veteran. But if you're just trying to get, understand the concepts of the game, just kind of find out some basic things about the game without wanting to know every little bit about how the game works, you can play on Recruit, stumble your way through it, have a good time, and have a reasonable chance of success. And I think that's where most people really approach games. I don't think, this is coming more into, I guess, maybe a review of the game, which wasn't really my intent. I've already played several games of this, and this is really more just of a playthrough. But I think that aside, I guess that's the direction we're going. But I think the vast majority of gamers, and this is just my own impression, I could be very wrong, and feel free to comment in the description if you disagree or agree for that matter. I think the vast majority of people who approach video games are not going to approach it in a sense of, I want to min-max this. There are those people out there, or they're not going to approach it with, I need to know every little intricacy, every little factor, every little rule so that I can, just dominate this game. Again, there are those people out there. And I think there's certainly a much higher percentage of those people in the strategy gaming genre. There's no doubt about that. But I do think that the idea that a game not being approachable because it doesn't, what was I going to say? I do think the idea that a game not being approachable because there are some things that you won't know without reading the manual is a little bit off base. I don't think a game is not approachable or not easy to learn or easy to start to play just because you might need to pick up the manual to know some things. I think any game, any of the best games out there are going to require you to pick up the manual to know all the little intricacies and to be able to be, as successful, the most successful you can possibly be. But I don't think that's necessarily in any way something that's going to prohibit a new player from picking the game up and starting to play it and enjoying it. And I guess that's where this little tangent is coming from, is that, yes, there are things that you won't know unless you read the manual. There are certainly deeper elements to this game than you would get without reading the manual, and that's fine. And you should read the manual if those are things that are important to you, or if you want to play this game at a very high level. But if you just want to pick up this game and play and kind of just enjoy your time and have a chance at victory and just kind of playing regular difficulty, I think this game is more than capable of allowing you to do that. Anyone can pick this game up, play it a bit, and just kind of figure things out. Again, as long as you're playing on regular difficulty, I think this is an incredibly approachable game. And I wouldn't call it intro level, because I do think the game has quite a few deeper elements that make this game much deeper than maybe the user interface would suggest. But I do think this is a game that is not going to scare away someone who is not into wargaming or strategy gaming. I think the only thing that might scare them away is the logistics aspect of the game, is that necessity to supply your units. I think the only negative response I've seen from this game from anyone I know was when I was doing a live stream on the game, literally just the first second I picked it up, and a friend of mine said, something to the effect of, when he heard the game say, unit request resupply, and I started shuttling some supplies out through helicopters. His impression was kind of a resupply necessary, resupply requested, no thanks, because he thought it was just going to be a total logistics fest, which is fine. Everyone has their own preferences, and everybody has different things they're looking for in games. But to say that the game isn't approachable, well, that's just not accurate in my opinion. The game may not cater to everybody's tastes and preferences, but that doesn't mean that it's not approachable, at least in my opinion. Anyway, I guess that took up almost a third of this video, which was not the intent at all. But that's where it is. You can see here our hearts and minds factors up to 59. We're really just mopping up. The game really kind of has a fatal, what is it? Not fatal funnel. Kind of like a tailspin of death or whatnot in some games where, once you lose, essentially, you may not know it for a little bit of time as you slowly get attrited to death. And I think, a lot of games get looked at negatively because of that, but it's certainly accurate to sort of the Vietnam psyche of the way the conflict was fought. In that sense, though, my point is that the game also has a similar aspect on victory. Once you get the NVA or the VC in a tough spot, and you really get that advantage, and you can start really utilizing your fire bases and your forward bases, and you've got units well spread out through the map with good helicopter and good artillery support. Once that gets established, the game can turn into the opposite, where it's just kind of a cycle of victory, where the enemy brings more units on map and you just wipe them out before they have a chance to really establish themselves and pose too much of a threat. And I think that's the same situation that we have here in this game, is where the enemy just hasn't been able to concentrate enough troops to pose enough of a threat, despite the fact that I'm playing, again, without full understanding of everything in this game. One of the things that you won't know without probably reading the manual or listening to a review is the fact that you can repair units that are damaged at the main base. However, that being said, while that's definitely something you need to be able to do to play at a high level, it didn't prevent me from winning this game and feeling like I was pretty competitive without that ability. So that's another example of one of those things that I didn't know till I listened to the podcast, or actually maybe that was some comments people had posted on my videos. Again, I played these games. I jumped into these games without any understanding of the manual and was able to be successful and have a good time. Again, not playing at a high level. However, playing at a level that was fun and enjoyable, and probably not too unlike the experience that a novice who would pick this game up from the App Store on the iPad or from Steam, who maybe had never heard of this before, and maybe this was their first war game. So at least in that sense, I think my experience was pretty typical of what you might expect from just an ordinary Joe. You can see here we're just kind of running out the clock. We've got quite a few political points. We've got up to 60 hearts and mind scores, so that shifts it pretty dramatically into a significant victory for us. You can see the American flag shows up on the hearts and mind score now. And yeah, so just mopping things up here. This should end the game in just a minute or so as we kind of move a few more I can't even speak. Move a few more units across the map. This was my first video in a little while, guys. I appreciate you sticking with me throughout and continuing to see those subscriber counts go up. Still have quite a bit of positive and thoughtful interaction on my videos. I've been really busy. I know I mentioned it in my previous video. Really busy lately with some schoolwork. April is kind of finals week in the school I'm in. Not week, finals month. Wow, I'm smart. Finals month in the school that I'm in. So just haven't had a whole lot of time to put things together. Certainly hoping once we get into May that I'll be able to start cranking out quite a few videos again before my summer courses on econ start up. But yeah, anyway, I appreciate you tuning in for this video here. We should be just about at the end of the battle here. And let me know if you have any other thoughts. You know, I'm still going to be doing that Out of the Park baseball series. That's kind of a long-term thing. It might take a few months to put together. Still doing that play-by-email game with Belugan, working my way through an early turn. But that may be a little while before I show any recordings, just because Belugan said that he's not going to look at my videos, but I don't know if I can trust that guy. I got to make sure that he's not, watching my videos and using that against me. Using what he sees in those videos against my turn, and giving basically him an inside look into everything I'm doing while I'm doing it. Yeah, I forget what else. Yeah, I'm also still working on that play-by-email series with Pew Pew Pachu on War in the West. Hasn't started up quite yet. Neither of us has had time. We're both in school, and finals and whatnot have hit us both very hard. But as we get into May, hopefully we can get that series going. In addition, working through my Commander the Great War series, I have run into a little bit of a stumbling block with the last, there you can see here we won a decisive victory. Running into a little bit of a stumbling block in Commander the Great War with the most recent patch, having some issues with my save game, but I thought the series was over and wasn't going to have any chance to succeed. However, when I kind of posted to that effect on Twitter, I got a response back within a few hours from one of the guys at the Lord's Game Studios, basically asking saying that he was aware of some issues, that they were working on a hot fix, or they had a hot fix, and they were working on a patch as well to fix those issues. So some real great support, really wonderful to have those guys reach out to me. Pretty not inspiring, but a pretty impressive approach by their being proactive. I'm hardly a big name press guy, but it was nice. It was nice to see and nice to get that response, and I really appreciate that. So hopefully we'll see more of that series. And again, still looking at To End All Wars. I'm going to revisit that here very shortly, or at least early May is my hope, once I've got that time off of school. Right now, I'm just kind of looking through the different achievements or what have you, the different medals you can win, achievements you can unlock in Steam. I also heard that apparently you can lower the amount of cooldown effect on airstrikes if you get certain medals unlocked. I haven't yet done that, but that'd be kind of an interesting ability if that is indeed true. And yeah, so that's where we are. We just won a decisive victory in Vietnam 65 on easy. I probably will do another video maybe on veteran. But until next time, guys, thanks for watching. This is the Historical Gamer signing out.